Let's talk about what happened. Extraordinary scenes last night as Prince William, clearly exasperating and actually showing us a little peek behind closed doors of the rising tension at the palaces.
Prince William just broke a silence that Buckingham Palace had protected for decades. Lady Louise Windsor, the girl no one was watching, has suddenly become the most consequential figure in the British monarchy. And Queen Camilla? She is furious. A secret Scottish estate hidden for 70 years. A sealed legal deed. And one single clause that demolished Camilla's years of careful planning in a single moment. But William's revelation runs deeper than property. This is a silent war that Queen Elizabeth set in motion long before her final breath, and she chose a 22-year-old girl to finish it. The palace is shaken. The truth is finally surfacing. Stay with us. What we reveal next will change everything you thought you knew about the crown. The girl they ignored. Lady Louise Windsor was never supposed to be the center of this story. She is the daughter of Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Born in 2003, she grew up far from the main royal spotlight. No major public duties. No headline-grabbing appearances. She spent her time riding horses, studying at St. Andrews University, and quietly building a life away from palace politics. That was exactly the point. While other royals were fighting for relevance by giving interviews, launching brands, and positioning themselves for influence, Lady Louise Windsor was doing something far more valuable. She was simply showing up. Every summer at Balmoral, she arrived without an agenda. No PR team, no staff, just a book and a pair of walking boots. Former palace staff noticed something unusual during those final summers Queen Elizabeth was still alive. The Queen, a woman who had spent 70 years surrounded by performance and protocol,
over 70 years, has been safe, reliable, practical, and consistent, much like her reign.
visibly relaxed around Louise. One lady-in-waiting later recalled that Louise never tried to impress the Queen. She was just present. That presence turned out to be worth more than any title. Between 2019 and 2021, Louise spent unusually long stretches with the Queen inside the private libraries at Balmoral. What the world assumed was bonding over horses was actually something deeper. Louise was being trusted with papers, letters, and personal records that were never meant for the official royal archives at Windsor. The Queen was not just spending time with her granddaughter, she was training her. Nobody noticed. And that was the plan. The estate no one knew about deep in the Scottish Highlands, past the familiar green hills of Balmoral, there is a stretch of terrain that most people will never visit. Granite peaks, ancient pine forests, moors where the weather can turn dangerous in minutes, and sitting in a natural bowl between old Victorian hunting corridors, a grey stone house that the British monarchy hid from public record for over 70 years. It was called the Grey House. Queen Elizabeth purchased it in 1952, just months after her father died, and she was suddenly queen.
In a way, I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young.
While the entire world was watching her coronation, she was quietly securing something private. The deed was not registered under a royal title. No mention of Her Majesty. No Crown Estate listing. It was purchased through a private holding company managed by a financial advisor who had handled the Queen Mother's personal Highland accounts. To any auditor who looked at the royal books, it appeared as a routine line item labeled site fee, a minor land management expense, completely invisible. Inside those stone walls, there were no gilded ceilings or ballrooms for visiting presidents. It was designed for solitude. The Queen would disappear there for 5 or 6 days at a time, still receiving her government red boxes, still doing the work of the state, but without anyone watching. No briefings, no cameras, no performance. Prince Philip reportedly hated it. He visited less and less after the 1960s. Princess Margaret stayed for less than 24 hours and left, calling it a monastery for one. King Charles, despite loving Scotland, had never once stepped inside. That last detail matters more than it seems, because when the campaign to seize the estate began in 2024, Charles had no emotional connection to defend. He could not fight for a place he had never entered, and the people who wanted it knew that. But there was something else inside the Grey House that made it truly dangerous. Not the land, but what was stored within it. Handwritten letters, photographic negatives, voice recordings, private correspondence with world leaders. None of it is digitized. None of it was submitted to Windsor. The unfiltered, unedited private life of a woman who spent 70 years performing for the world. The Queen had kept it all, and she had already decided who would guard it next. Camilla's secret campaign. This did not begin as an open confrontation. It began quietly with a question that sounded like paperwork. By autumn 2024, Queen Camilla had been on the throne for over 2 years. She was respected, but she was also aware of something that no title could fix. Elizabeth II had been a figure of myth. Camilla, no matter how capable, was always viewed through the lens of how she arrived. She understood that in the monarchy, real influence comes from controlling symbols, history, and land. She began making discreet inquiries into the site fee accounts. She did not ask about the Grey House by name. Instead, she framed it as an administrative audit, questioning whether any royal assets had been withheld from formal estate declarations. It was a cold, calculated move dressed up as routine governance. The Parker Bowles family moved in parallel. Tom Parker Bowles, a food writer with a sharp eye for branding,
Queen Camilla's son's new interview about his mother and her decades-long relationship with King Charles
had already been researching zoning regulations in the Cairngorms region months before anyone knew the Grey House existed. His team had tourism concepts ready. They wanted to turn the estate into a high-end Highland brand, attaching the Parker Bowles name to the most intimate private space the House of Windsor ever owned. In early January 2026, the campaign moved into the open. At a private evening meeting at Burke Hall, Camilla presented King Charles with a leather-bound proposal. She spoke of stewardship, literary retreats, conservation projects, limited heritage tourism. It sounded visionary, but underneath the polished pitch was a straightforward play: control the estate, access the archives, and own the narrative of Elizabeth's private life. Charles stalled. He deferred meetings. He asked the Royal Estate Council to review ownership structures untouched since 1952. He was caught between loyalty to his wife and something he could not quite name, a feeling that this particular piece of land was protected by more than geography. He was right. He just did not yet know how protected. What Camilla did not realize was that she had already made a critical mistake. Weeks before presenting her formal proposal, she had authorized private surveyors to visit the estate under the banner of environmental evaluation. And they were not quiet about it. The clock was running out on Camilla's plan. But she did not know it yet. The clause that ended everything. In October 2021, Queen Elizabeth sat in the private library at Windsor Castle and signed a document that most of the world would not hear about for another 4 years. It was not her primary will. That dealt with palaces, jewels, and the machinery of the crown. This was something separate, a conditional personal legacy deed. a private legal instrument designed to operate completely outside the traditional royal estate channels. At its center was a section that royal legal staff would later refer to in hushed tones. They called it Clause 31, a name the Queen chose deliberately, referencing the 31st day of her own reign, the first time she had visited the Grey House alone as sovereign. Clause 31 was written to do one thing: make the estate untouchable. It stipulated 3 conditions. First, the property would only transfer after the final passing of all designated trustees. Second, it was permanently removed from any parliamentary oversight or crown review. Third, and this is the part that hit like a wall, Queen Camilla, her children, and their direct descendants were explicitly and permanently excluded from any form of access, ownership, or influence over the estate. Only 4 people on Earth knew this clause existed before the 2026 announcement: the Queen's personal solicitor, Princess Anne, the Queen's longtime private archivist, and Prince Edward. Each had sworn a level of secrecy that went beyond their official royal oaths. They watched in complete silence as Camilla's surveyors walked the moors. They watched as the leather-bound proposal was presented to Charles. They said nothing, because they knew something Camilla did not. The lock had already been changed, and her name was not on any key. When the sealed inheritance letter was finally opened by the palace solicitor in late 2025, the language inside was unmistakably Elizabeth. The Grey House was described not as a monument, but as a refuge. The archives within were to remain the private thoughts of a woman, not the public record of a monarch. And the person chosen to hold them was Lady Louise Windsor. On January 15, 2026, Buckingham Palace released a brief surgical statement confirming the transfer. The Grey House, along with everything inside it, now belonged to a 22-year-old girl that most of the palace had barely paid attention to. The surveyors were recalled. The tourism plans were shelved. The leather-bound proposals went into desk drawers. And inside Windsor Castle, the atmosphere changed overnight. William speaks and the palace shakes. For several days after the January 15th announcement, the official royal response was careful silence. Then William spoke. Prince William's confirmation of the inheritance made
William, Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you.
During a brief but pointed statement to a small group of royal correspondents was not just an acknowledgement of fact, it was a deliberate signal. He did not have to speak. He chose to. And in doing so, he made clear exactly where the future of the monarchy stood on this issue. Inside the palace, the fallout was immediate. On the evening of January 26th, in the Long Gallery at Windsor Castle, a confrontation took place that senior courtiers would describe for months afterward. Queen Camilla, visibly shaken, confronted Princess Anne directly. She accused Anne of manipulating a young woman into a role she was not trained for, of using Louise as an instrument against the reigning sovereign's household, of deliberately undermining the slimmed-down monarchy that Charles had championed. Anne did not raise her voice. She stood without moving and waited for Camilla to finish. Then she said, quietly, "Neither were you. And yet, here we are." Camilla left the room without responding. Behind the scenes, Duchess Sophie had already been preparing for exactly this kind of fallout. A former public relations professional, she understood how unofficial pressure campaigns worked. Months before the inheritance was finalized, she had authorized a full cybersecurity audit of the Grey House and its surrounding land. The findings were unsettling. Drone activity had been detected above the property's roof line. Remote trail cameras had been discovered on the northern tree line, positioned to record anyone entering or leaving. The equipment was sophisticated, the kind that required serious funding. Sophie moved fast. Military-grade signal jamming was installed. Louise's personal protection detail was staffed with officers whose loyalty to the late Queen was beyond question. Prince Edward, meanwhile, handled the final internal pressure. When Camilla called him personally in November 2025, asking him to delay the public release of the inheritance record for legal clarification, Edward's response was immediate and final. "My daughter will not be a placeholder for your ambitions. You had your turn." The process moved forward without delay. By the time February arrived, the shape of the palace had changed. Anne, Edward, and Sophie had formed a quiet, protective structure around Louise that neither the king's hesitation nor the queen's ambition could penetrate. The Grey House transfer was completed. The archives remained sealed. And Lady Louise Windsor, without asking for any of it, had become the most quietly powerful figure in the British monarchy. William's public confirmation was the final piece. It told the world that the next generation of the Windsor family had made its choice. And it was not Camilla. Louise steps forward. On a cold afternoon in late January 2026, Lady Louise Windsor walked into a centuries-old chapel near the Grey House estate. No camera crews, no red carpet. One protection officer at a respectful distance. Pinned to her coat was a brooch that sent royal historians into immediate focus. An Edwardian silver piece thistle and Tudor roses, small diamond center. On its underside, an engraving that only 3 people in Queen Elizabeth's life had ever seen, written, "For service, not spectacle." It was a private motto the Queen had used only in handwritten letters to Princess Anne, Prince Philip, and Lady Sarah. By wearing it publicly, Louise was not making a fashion choice. She was making a statement about exactly what kind of inheritance she had accepted. Inside the chapel, she stepped to the microphone, something she had avoided for 22 years, and spoke for 2 minutes. "The house I inherited is not a trophy. I do not claim it because of my name, but because of what I have learned from those who came before me. Quiet loyalty, private strength, and a faith that does not perform, but protects." She paused, then added, "I will not allow its memory to be rewritten for convenience." The clip reached 15 million views within hours. Princess Catherine posted a handwritten note to her personal social media the same evening. It read, "Legacy is not what we receive, it is what we choose to preserve." It gathered over 3 million likes in under 20 minutes. A BBC poll released on February 5th showed that 71% of British adults believed Louise should receive full royal status and a formal title. In Scotland, that number climbed to 84%. King Charles responded by offering her exactly that full elevation to Her Royal Highness, Princess Louise. The offer came with conditions: part-time London residence, formal security evaluation, and an end to her private equestrian coaching work. Louise declined. Standing on the steps of the Grey House on February 10th, in the Highland snow, she gave her answer to a live audience of over 9 million viewers. Duty does not require a title. For now, I remain simply Lady Louise. Queen Elizabeth spent 70 years being watched. Every word calculated.
In her 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II ushered her nation through unprecedented change.
Every appearance managed. Every emotion filtered through the demands of the crown. The Grey House was the one place where none of that existed, and she gave it to the one person in her family who never needed an audience to do the right thing. Lady Louise Windsor did not fight for this inheritance. She did not campaign, leak, or perform her way into it. She simply showed up year after year and was trusted because of it. Camilla had the lawyers. The Parker Bowles family had the plans. William confirmed what they could not stop. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the most. If this story made you think, share it. And tell us in the comments, what do you think Queen Elizabeth would say to Louise today?